But what did the Reverend say that was wrong in that first in his first commentary there?
Well, actually, that's why I've been talking to a lot of people for the last few weeks. I didn't hear anything that was wrong. I like to appeal to people's intelligence. I mean, everything that the pastor said was factual. He didn't embellish anything. So I really can't even grasp why people were really upset with this commentary. I think a lot of people in America, a lot of American citizens may have a case of amnesia. There's a group called the Native Americans. You know, there's one clip that he had where they said that they thought that it was a little bit extreme for him to say that the American government created the AIDS virus to kill off blacks. But if you look at the moral history of America, okay, it does stand to reason. It's not some far off thinking process. You know, it's not irate to think like that, because we had smallpox with the Native Americans, okay?
And it killed a lot of them too.
And it killed a lot of them. We had a Tuskegee experiment.
I think there was 400 blacks tested, or not tested, inflicted with syphilis.
Right. So, I mean, we're looking at the Native American population being totally a case of genocide by the American government on its own citizenry. So I'm just saying a lot of things that he said, almost everything he said was actual factual. I can't understand why some people are upset with the things that he said. Let's talk about it. If he's wrong, tell us what he said that was wrong.
And that's you hit the nail on the head there. That's why we're doing the show, because it's important to some of the feelings that were swept under the carpet back in the 60s in the racial discussions. I think that, you know, all that stuff should be talked about right now, because we're all adults, and that's the only way we can move forward here, because the black-white issue is nothing in comparison to when all these other ethnics get here, people who are warring someplace else, and here in Fort Wayne they're living in the same apartment complex. Ms. Banks, I don't know how long you've known Reverend Wright, but tell me a little bit about him, you know, about what you know about him, because he seems to be very scholarly in his articulation and his command of facts.
First of all, I joined Trinity in 1982, which is a very long time ago. However, what drew me to Trinity United Church, it had a lot to do with, because he has been to school. He does have a doctorate degree. He does speak 13 different languages. He's not just someone just saying something. Then he's lived a lot of things. So even with this clip that you just showed, something that's amazing is actually someone else really made those statements. And he's been castorized, if you want to say it, because
crucified.
You know, because of it. But someone else actually made that statement. But we don't know that, because we don't see that snippet of it. And then a lot of people feel that he's angry. And he's not necessarily angry, but he does have a problem with the inequality in this country. It still exists. So who can he say that to but his own congregation, to make them aware so they can take some responsibility as well for their community. And that's the thing I think people don't understand is Chicago is the most segregated city in the nation. Because of that, communities have to help those communities. And he's done that. I mean, he does a lot within that community. And that Trinity has grown to 8,500 for a reason. And there are doctors and lawyers, and then there are gangbangers and, you know, homeless people. All of them fit right there, because we all are part of that community, whether or not we want to believe that and understand that or not.
You know, when the media talks about this, they talk about, you know, how can you join a church like that? And I noticed that the cities that I've lived in, I lived in Detroit for a little while, lived in Annapolis. Each time I would go to a city to live there, I would always try to find a church that was the most aggressive, outspoken in the community, because I would never want to attend a church where the pastor was afraid to be socially active, politically active, you know. And a lot of pastors have told me, you know, straight up that they're here to take you to Jesus and to save your soul, but yet other pastors are more well-rounded, and they try to push forth the civil rights agenda and make me feel like, you know, you are somebody. Right. But, you know, Jabbar, you know, you said something there a moment ago. Go ahead.
Well, let me say, first of all, let me give a disclaimer, because, you know, a lot of people know that I like Obama, the things they represent, but I don't represent the Obama campaign or Barack Obama himself. Okay, this is my independent opinions. But I like to say a lot of the political rhetoric that you heard the pastor talking about when he gave a sequence of things that he felt were issues for America to discuss. The prisons that America is building is filled up with black people and Latinos, okay, and we're only about 16% of the population. When he talks about the AIDS virus, when he talks about slavery, Jim Crow, he's letting you know as a Christian minister, okay, even in the context of Christianity, God has limits to people's aggression and disobedience to what's righteous and what's just. So he is saying that America has accumulated enough unrighteousness, if you will, for lack of a better word, enough unrighteousness for God to have a point where he says God may be in the mindset of damning America. There was a time in the Bible, I watch Hannity and Combs, I watch the O'Reilly Factor, I listen to Rush Limbaugh on Woe, Glenn Beck, I listen to all of the right-wing radicals. But nobody wants to talk about God having a limit where he cuts people off and then it's time for Judgment Day. We like to talk about love, God's forgiving, God's love, but let's talk about the aspects where God flooded the whole planet for people being disobedient. Let's talk about when he drowned Pharaoh's army for slavery. So I think that's the context where people say, why is he saying these political things from the pulpit? But God deals with society. You know what I'm saying? You can't separate those. I know we say it's separation in church and state, but if you're saying God is the God of everything and everybody, you're going to have to talk about the society in which you live. And I think Pastor Wright was speaking in that context, that the ills that America has reaped upon itself and to other people around the world is catching the attention of God himself.
Ms. Banks, why do you feel the media is distorting Reverend Wright?
Well, I am an Obama believer. I think it has a lot to do with that. I think it has a lot to do with they can't find enough things on him. Mm-hmm. They found these snippets. Fantastic, here we go. Right. We found something. It might not be everything, but we did find something. Right. Because they haven't been able to find anything else, really. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why. Mainly that's why, because there have been white ministers that have said a lot of things that live at the White House. And we just gloss over that. Oh, well, we don't really believe in what he said, but let's move on. Mm-hmm. But they won't let this move on. You know what I'm saying? They continue. Every day is something. And I think eventually he will come out and speak because he does need to speak at this point, just for himself, not even about Barack Obama, because now it's his character, even though people who know Reverend Wright, and United Church of Christ is 90% Caucasian. We are the largest African-American church within the United Church of Christ. And if these things were that bad, they would have not allowed him to stay in this white congregation. This church is a white denomination. So, in America, we have found ways to separate, if you will, and that's what we do. You can watch Hannity and Combs. You can watch Bill O'Reilly. Matter of fact, Bill O'Reilly is going to be pretty good tonight.
Yeah. I want to watch it.
But you have to watch him, mm-hmm. even if you don't agree with him, because something about even Barack Obama is trying to state, people talk about Christianity, but Christianity does not mean kick you under the bus. Mm-hmm. It means to forgive you, have a dialogue with you that you might not agree with, and be able to move past that. Mm-hmm. And this country still has not forgiven. They don't accept or take that responsibility for these ill wills. Mm-hmm. So it must continue to be talked about. And in a church, in a black church, that's the most segregated day of the day on a Sunday morning. And African Americans have always looked for the church for guidance. And if you can talk about those issues to make people understand that these things are out here, and this is what we must do to prevent these from happening to us, to be able to stand up, to take care of your own self, your own community. That's where you learn it, at the church.
Also, if I could real quick, I like what you said about taking responsibility for social ills Okay, it's up to the legislators. It's up to every American citizen to really take responsibility for the ills, not just of past ills, but contemporary ills.
Right.
You know, my father told me one time, you know, because we have a lot of white friends in our family. We have white relatives in our family. And, you know, and their situation was this. Their position was this. I wasn't born during the slave days. You know, it's not my fault. And a lot of that is true. But if you put it in the context of society, my dad told him, there was a friend of his they work with, he said you can have a case where a man can be HIV positive. He can have AIDS. You can have a woman who has AIDS. If they get together and they have a child, okay, the child is born into the world with AIDS. It had nothing to do with the ignorance of the parents, but it has to deal with the burdens and the ill decisions that the parents made that brought that child into existence. It has to deal with it. And it's the same thing if we put in the context of America. You may not have been the actual person who owned slaves, cut off heads, raped the women. You haven't done all of that, but you stood to benefit from the inheritance, the generational inheritance that was passed down from your great-great-grandfather all the way down to you. You haven't relinquished that property. I know I have a lot of good friends, okay? If they get stolen property, they have stolen property. I have friends that have stolen property. Guess what? A lot of these Allen County judges sent them to jail. You know what? So let's put that in the larger context of society, in the context of society. Right now, we're standing on and living on stolen land that was ill-gotten by murder and bloodshed. Okay? So there's a lot to talk about. I mean, it's not ancient history.
Well, you know, with what Reverend Wright is bringing up, you know, that type of a dialogue allows us to put the past into perspective, so that we don't just think that was just old stuff that happened back then. No, it's, you know, some form of that is going on today.